Growing up in foggy Seattle, the Anderson house looked picture perfect from the outside, but inside, the reality was much colder. At 16, I, Chloe, was the invisible older sister, always expected to yield. My 13-year-old sister Mia was the center of our parents' universe, learning early on that tears were her ultimate weapon. I'll never forget winning first place at the regional science fair. I ran home, clutching my blue ribbon, bursting with pride. But my mom brushed right past me. Mia was sobbing over a tiny misstep at dance practice, and my victory was instantly eclipsed. No one even asked to see my ribbon. From that day on, I learned to shrink, quietly hiding my report cards and burying my achievements just to keep the peace. The favoritism soon evolved into something much more manipulative. Mia developed a habit of taking my things without asking, a favorite sweater, pieces of jewelry I had saved up for months to buy. Whenever I gently confronted her, she would deny it without blinking. Even if my sweater was sitting right there on her bed, my parents would just sigh in annoyance. "Chloe, please don't make a big deal out of nothing," they'd say. So I learned to swallow my frustration and keep quiet. But the ultimate breaking point arrived one afternoon when Mom noticed $50 missing from her purse. The entire house instantly grew tense. Without hesitating for a second, Mia spoke up. "I saw Chloe lingering near your bag before school this morning," she lied effortlessly. I was immediately pulled into Dad's home office for an interrogation. I tried desperately to explain that I had left early for the library, but they completely ignored my side of the story. Because of Mia's calculated lie, I was severely punished. Worst of all, my hard-earned spot at a prestigious summer science camp was instantly revoked. As I walked out of the room, fighting back tears of injustice, I saw Mia waiting in the hallway. When our parents turned their backs, she gave me a small, triumphant smirk. She had just realized her lies were completely untouchable. Have you ever been in a situation where your own family flat out refused to believe your truth? How did that make you feel? Please share your story in the comments below. I always read through your experiences, and sometimes, just knowing someone else understands makes all the difference. The real breaking point didn't start with a shouting match. It started quietly, with a boy named Liam Brooks. Mia had a massive, almost obsessive crush on him, constantly writing his name in the margins of her notes. But Liam was in my AP chemistry class and was completely struggling to keep his grades afloat. Knowing I was top of the class, he asked me to tutor him after school, and I happily agreed. One Tuesday afternoon, Liam caught up with me by my locker to thank me for the study sessions. We were just chatting and laughing about a ridiculously hard equation when I glanced down the hall. There was Mia. She was staring at us, her face completely pale with an intense, quiet fury. After that moment, the atmosphere at home became absolutely suffocating. Mia initiated a vicious, icy, silent treatment, refusing to even look in my direction at the dinner table. In our house, Mia's silence was always the terrifying calm before a catastrophic storm. Yet, later that same week, a tiny ray of hope pierced through my gloomy reality. I attended an extracurricular science seminar featuring a guest speaker, Dr. Sarah Mitchell. She was a brilliant 62-year-old university professor. After her presentation, I stayed behind to ask a few complex questions about her research. She seemed genuinely surprised and deeply impressed by my curiosity. Before parting ways, she handed me her professional business card. She looked me right in the eye, her expression warm but serious, and said something I would never forget. "You have a brilliant mind, Chloe. Don't ever let anyone dim your light." By Friday evening, the local news was blaring severe weather warnings. A massive, historic storm was bearing down on Seattle. Rain hammered violently against the windows as we sat down for dinner. Suddenly, dramatic, hysterical sobbing echoed from the living room. It was Mia. We rushed in to find her curled on the couch. With trembling hands, she held up her phone, displaying a completely fabricated group chat. The fake messages, supposedly from me, were terribly cruel, calling her names and bragging about stealing leads. Before I could even process the fake cyberbullying claims, Mia rolled up her sleeve to reveal a dark, purplish bruise. "Chloe pushed me down the stairs," she sobbed. "The room spun." "I never touched her," I pleaded. But my dad slammed his fist against the coffee table, his anger overpowering the storm outside. "Enough!" he roared. verbally tearing me apart. He looked at me with absolute disgust. "You are sick. I don't need a sick daughter in this house." Outside, the wind howled and lightning tore across the pitch-black sky, but my parents didn't care. They forced me to the front door, coldly kicking their 16-year-old daughter out into the freezing, torrential rain, and told me never to come back. A 16-year-old girl, completely abandoned by her own family in the middle of one of Seattle's most brutal storms. What will Chloe do to survive the freezing night? Make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell right now so you don't miss what happens next. The Seattle rain was relentless, freezing, and felt like icy needles against my skin. I was completely soaked, shivering uncontrollably as I wandered aimlessly through the flooded, pitch-black streets. Pure, overwhelming despair began to swallow me whole. I pulled out my phone, desperately praying for a lifeline, but the screen was black. The battery was completely dead. I had tried calling friends earlier, but no one answered. I was utterly and terrifyingly alone. I just kept walking, completely numb from the freezing cold and the crushing shock of being thrown away by my own parents. As I stepped off the curb to cross a dimly lit intersection, the wind howled, blinding me with thick sheets of rain. Suddenly, bright headlights pierced through the darkness. I heard the terrifying screech of tires hydroplaning on the wet asphalt, but I couldn't move fast enough. The heavy impact threw me sideways. I slammed against the hood of the car before crashing hard onto the unforgiving pavement. A sharp, white-hot pain exploded in my head, and the world immediately began to spin. I heard a car door slam and frantic footsteps splashing through the deep puddles. "Oh my God, are you okay?" A panicked woman's voice cried out. Gentle hands touched my shoulders. As I fought to keep my heavy eyes open, the blurry face above me slowly came into focus. It was the guest speaker from my school, Dr. Sarah Mitchell. Tears mixed with the rain streaming down my face. Before the darkness completely pulled me under, I managed to whisper my heartbreaking reality. "They don't want me anymore. They said I'm sick." And then, everything went black. I drifted back into consciousness to the steady beeping of hospital monitors. My head throbbed with the blinding pain of a severe concussion, but the first thing I noticed was a warm hand gently holding mine. Dr. Sarah Mitchell hadn't left my side once. Hours later, my parents finally walked into the sterile room. There were no frantic. Instead, they stood at the foot of the bed with a cold, detached demeanor, immediately blaming me for reckless. Dr. Sarah wasn't having any of it. She stood up, her presence instantly commanding the room. "You forced a 16-year-old girl out into a historic freezing storm," she stated, her voice sharp with absolute disbelief and anger. My father puffed out his chest defensively. "That is a private family matter. It was a necessary disciplinary measure." Dr. Sarah's eyes narrowed. She instantly recognized the deeply toxic, abusive dynamic playing out right in front of her. "Discipline?" she fired back, her tone freezing over. "Get out of this room, both of you. You're done here." The moment they were gone, she didn't waste a single second. She immediately called a hospital social worker and began filing the official paperwork for temporary guardianship, absolutely determined to protect me from the very people who were supposed to love me the most. Dr. Sarah's sudden appearance in this dark chapter was truly a guiding light that saved Chloe's life. If you also support this incredible woman's decisive and fiercely protective actions, please hit that like button on this video. 6 months later, my entire world had completely transformed. I officially moved in with Dr. Sarah, trading a toxic, suffocating environment for a beautiful, quiet home overflowing with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, thriving green plants, and genuine warmth. For the first time in my life, I actually felt safe. I transferred to a completely new high school across town and made the empowering decision to sever all contact with the Anderson family. No calls, no text messages, no looking back. They had made their choice that night in the freezing storm, and now I was making mine. Under Sarah's gentle but unwavering guidance, I slowly began to rebuild my shattered self-worth. She didn't just give me a roof over my head, she gave me the emotional support to truly heal. With her constant encouragement, my academic potential absolutely skyrocketed. I threw myself into my studies, not as a way to hide from the world, but as a way to forge a brand new future. All those late-night study sessions and moments of pushing past my own doubts finally paid off. When graduation rolled around, I was accepted into a prestigious university on a full-ride scholarship. By then, I knew exactly what I wanted to do with my life. I chose to major in education policy. I was fiercely determined to understand the systemic flaws that let vulnerable kids slip through the cracks. I wanted to build real, lasting support systems to advocate for neglected youth, turning my deepest pain into my greatest purpose so no other child would ever feel invisible. 14 years passed in the blink of an eye. At 30 years old, I had built a life I was truly proud of, serving as the director of a highly impactful educational program. Driven entirely by the darkest chapter of my past, I proudly founded the Second Chance Scholarship Fund. This initiative was specifically designed to provide a financial and emotional lifeline to brilliant students trying to escape abusive, unstable home environments. Over the years, the foundation grew exponentially, successfully altering the trajectories of dozens of young lives who just needed one person to believe in them. Then, one ordinary afternoon, fate intervened in the most unexpected way. I received an incredible honor, a formal invitation to be the keynote speaker at the upcoming State University graduation ceremony. As I was reviewing the event logistics, a colleague casually handed me the official roster of the graduating class. My heart completely stopped. My eyes locked onto a very specific name printed on the list, Mia Anderson. My estranged younger sister was graduating at that exact ceremony. After 14 years of total silence, the memories of that freezing storm rushed back. But I didn't panic. Instead, I firmly accepted the invitation and immediately began preparing a groundbreaking, unforgettable speech. With only a few days left until the massive graduation ceremony, what do you guys think? Should Chloe completely expose her family's true colors in front of thousands of people? Drop your honest opinions in the comments down below before we dive into the final chapter. The massive university auditorium was packed to the brim with excited graduates. Sitting right in the front row were my biological parents and Mia, looking incredibly proud and undeniably arrogant as they soaked in what they thought was their perfect family moment. When the university president announced the keynote speaker, I walked calmly onto the bright stage. The look of sheer, unadulterated shock that washed over my estranged family's faces was unforgettable. They stared at me like they had just seen a ghost. I stepped up to the wooden podium and looked out at the thousands of faces. I didn't begin my speech with anger or bitterness. Instead, I simply chose to tell a raw, undeniable truth. I told the audience a story about a terrified 16-year-old girl who was coldly thrown out of her home into a freezing Seattle storm. I spoke about a girl whose parents looked her in the eye, called her a sick burden, and told her she was no longer wanted. As a pin-drop silence fell over the massive room, I shifted my focus. I publicly thanked the incredible woman who had saved my life and taken me in. I smiled warmly at Dr. Sarah Mitchell, who was sitting in the audience, beaming back at me with proud tears in her eyes. My biological parents sat completely petrified, paralyzed by the public exposure of their dark secret. Mia hung her head in absolute crushing shame, desperately trying to hide her face from the confused, questioning stares of her college friends sitting all around her. After the ceremony, my phone blew up. My biological parents frantically texted and called, desperately begging to make amends. I read their messages, but I never replied. I forgave them for my own peace of mind, but establishing a permanent, unbreakable boundary was necessary. I wasn't going to let them back into my life. Instead, I focused entirely on the Second Chance Scholarship, watching it grow and finally living my true purpose. Today, I proudly call Dr. Sarah Mitchell Mom. Because family isn't about blood, it's about who chooses to show up for you in the storm. Sometimes the most beautiful revenge is simply living an incredibly meaningful life. What do you think about this definition of family? Share this video with anyone who might need some healing today, and hit subscribe for more deep family stories. See you next time.